2, 1.
New York, NY. LaunchPod starts now.
Welcome to the New York Launch Pod, the New York Press Club award-winning podcast on the most interesting new startups, businesses, and openings in the New York City area. I'm your host and New York attorney Hal Cooper-Smith, and in this episode, Arent Luo, co-founder of Caraa, returns to the New York Launch Pod to discuss his handbag company made specifically for the modern woman. Since we last spoke, Caraa has been successfully adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic and has developed a number of new products while staying active on social issues. Here's Arent.
We're getting customers for the mask. I think, for us, in terms of the bags, to answer your question directly, I think we purposely started to promote products that are somewhat more relevant to the pandemic. So yes, people are not going to the office, but they're still taking walks, right? For example, like hiking and walking and outdoor sport was still very much a thing, especially last summer and fall.
But before we go to the interview, if you haven't already, remember to sign up for our monthly newsletter for unique content and insights at nylaunchpod.com and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite listening app. And we have a sponsor, ResQ, New York's premier residential rental compliance platform. Have you rented out residential property in New York State? If so, odds are that you are not compliant with the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act enacted by New York State in 2019. And if you don't follow the law, your tenant may be able to legally stay in the property beyond the length of the lease. You may not be able to increase the rent by the desired amount, and even more problems. ResQ is designed to solve all of that and more. Go to resqme.com and enter in some basic lease information, and ResQ will take care of the rest so you can relax and be a more profitable landlord. That's resqme.com, RezQueme.com. And with that, let's go to the interview.
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
How you doing? I'm doing good.
I'm doing good. What'd you say?
I'm good.
Hey, you? I'm walking in.
Fantastic. What you say? How you doing?
So you have been a successful bag company. The pandemic hits, and you decide to pivot to masks. What was that like?
Yeah, no, it's a good question and something that I've been asked quite a bit. Because to a lot of new customers that we have, I think, acquired over the pandemic, some of them actually didn't know that we were a bag company, right? Because the first time they discovered us was through kind of the good publicity we received around masks. So let me take a step back, because I think there's a good story behind this and how we got into the mask. I don't even want to call it a business, because it really was more of a charity / social project that we started. So kind of rewind things a little bit. And, we were in the beginning of the pandemic last year. This was back in January, February last year. We started hearing a lot of noise and getting news from Asia in terms of what's happening there. And starting to see that back then the U.S. government was kind of taking the stand of, well, this is not going to hit the U.S. This is just going to be another flu or we're not going to get impacted, right? And we kind of looking at each other is like, this doesn't feel small, and to us, it felt a little bit like SARS, in terms of what kind of the overall feeling around that. So obviously starting in March, that's when the numbers starting to spike, especially where we live in New York City. And, we kind of said, and kind of the world just went into a spin, if you may. And we said, look, as a fashion brand and as a global citizen, we didn't want to just kind of wait and see, right? We spoke to a lot of colleagues, and someone was like, yeah, there's a lot of unknowns. I kind of want to just kind of wait it out and see what happens. And I'm talking to my team and even to my family. I said, listen, I'm not that old, but, hopefully, this is kind of the only pandemic I see in my lifetime. And I don't want to wait and see. I want to join the fight, especially when the country is in jeopardy, and a bit of a chaos. So we actually, reached out to a bunch of nonprofit organizations. We reached out to State of New York, City of New York, to a bunch of government officials. And overwhelmingly, I think the feedback we received was, hey, the number one thing you can potentially do is provide masks. And this back then, just masks weren't available. There were N95s, which a lot of them were reserved for the frontline workers, right? And we say, what can we do to provide masks? And this is a little bit we were in a unique position because bearing in mind we are a vertically integrated brand, right? So unlike a lot of brands where they work with different factories, we actually own our own factory. We have different factories that we do work with as well from time to time, but primarily, we have the control of our production and our supply chain. So, I sat down with the board and essentially kind of pivoted a little bit and transformed part of our factory and taking some of our scraps from our luxury handbags to actually make masks. And initially, it wasn't going to be selling to anybody. It was just purely donating to homeless shelters, to essentially people in need, people that didn't have a lot of PR budget, people who maybe don't have a big voice, but we know for sure that they are in a very close area and need the masks. So we did that. We posted on social media. We have a pretty engaging community on social. So I think a few of our customers saw that and it's like, hey, we need masks. Can we get some? And can you just sell me some? And that was the deciding moment, right? It's like, okay, what do we do? Do we sell some? Do we not? And I think we came to a conclusion pretty quickly that this is very much needed. So we launched the campaign called Caraa Cares, which lasted almost a full year, where we said for every mask we sell, we match it with our own donation, which is something that we're pretty proud of. And then off we went. So because we were one of the first fashion brands that kind of took that step, I think we got a lot of love from the press. And my goal, I told them that what we're hoping to do is just inspire other brands, right? Others to step up, don't sit on the sidelines, find ways to help during this pandemic. So, that's why I said before, we see it very much as a social program in terms of helping the community where we can. And obviously, we have over 150 organizations that we were able to donate to in the last year. We're still continuing to do charity work and donations where we can. Obviously, based on the latest CDC guidelines, I think things have changed a little bit in terms of the mask requirement. We still see there's a huge need for wearing masks in certain social settings. So I think, the key as a business, the key thing that we walked away from that, it's mainly just building goodwill. Showing people that we're not all about business, but there's a huge social goodness to our brand, our mission. I think that's the key wing from the business or from the brand standpoint.
You identified a problem early on, and then you pivoted your manufacturing. But I think you're also being a little bit humble because your mask was top rated as super comfortable. It's lightweight. It got a lot of press around being a very effective mask that people want to wear. What was the ability, based off of your scrap bag fabric, as you described, to be able to transition that and that manufacturing process as well? And why did it work? What made it so comfortable?
Yeah, that was a hard thing, man. It was one of those things where, we knew that our fabric that we use for bags had its very unique properties, right? Material properties and chemical properties, because they were initially designed for bag. Which is
kind of weird because it's a bag, right? I mean, who would have thought that a bag fabric works as a face mask?
That's right. What's interesting though is bear in mind, right? The genesis of our brand, Caraa, the bag brand, back in 2014, 15 when we started, it started as a sports bag that can transition with her for inside and outside the fitness studio. That was the initial genesis behind, the kind of the seed behind the brand itself. And what that translated to in terms of product is that our products are very versatile and a lot of them are antibacterial, right? Not all of them has antibacterial lining, but few of them do. So, to a certain extent, material technology or material components, if you may, has always been on top of mind for us, when it comes to design. So, this wasn't like, oh, we're a leather company and now let's go out there and start talking about fabric. But still, to your question, it's how do we know that this bag fabric can actually work? So it took a lot of tests, very rapid tests. We partner with an international lab to make sure that, everything that we are doing, it's safe, that it's protective. And obviously we don't do any kind of that claim because it's very much just a fashion mask, but still, there's certain things that we want to discover about our fabrics. And I think one thing to know too, it's because we were early into kind of offering the mask, it did allow us to kind of go through a few iterations in a pretty quick manner. So yes, you're right. Wall Street Journal, in the summer did call us, the most breathable mask in the world, which is very humble and very awesome that because they went through, I think, north of 50 masks, 50 brands. But yeah, I think it just took a lot of rapid iteration. We found some really good partners in terms of the labs that we work with. So they were stepping up and helping us kind of giving that feedback right away. So it kind of allowed us to kind of do that iteration after we went through the initial set of scraps. Because, again, initially it was using our luxury material for scrap. Then we kind of opened up to other mills and other material fabrics suppliers that we have a relationship with and start exploring more. So later on, if you go to the website, now we have a lot bigger of an assortment. But yeah, I think, being early definitely helped just because it gave us that little time of doing the back and forth iteration testing to make sure the product is good.
And right now you have velvet mask also.
Yeah, velvet mask we launched a few months ago. And I think the use case for mask has changed a little bit, right? It started last year. It was mainly just giving me something that I can protect myself and protect others. That was the initial kind of boundaries around why people wear a mask. As time went on and, we kind of gained more control of the pandemic, I think a lot of customers just started saying, hey, I love the shape. I love how it feels, but, do you have something a little dressier? So we listen very carefully to our customers as far as like what they want, what they need. Velvet and some embellishment mask, there's some pretty cool embellishment masks that we're launching in the next few weeks that I think is going to be really cool. All of that came from customers, just passionate customer that says, me or my kids love your mask, but, there's a lot of variety out there. And, do you have anything with confetti on it or with rainbow on it or so on and so forth. So, so now we're opening up to a much bigger variety to kind of accommodate the customer demand.
So you were ranked, as you mentioned, Wall Street Journal, top breathable mask. What did that mean for your company? Because a top mask in the middle of a pandemic, and now people may be hearing about your company for the first time.
Yeah, it was very humble. With a lot of this kind of organic press, you don't really know until the day they release the article. There's no heads up, there's no nothing. So, for us, it really translated to a lot of customers coming to us and asking for that particular mask that was featured. And, allowed us to truthfully create a good relationship with them over time, right? I mean, the article came out in the summer. We've tried to essentially build a long-lasting relationship with them after they purchase the mask, either with mask product or with bag products, and just kind of want to continue building that relationship with them. So yes, it was definitely a humbling experience. We definitely got, a surge of customers coming in just because of that credibility that we gained from, an awesome editorial like a Wall Street Journal. But I think the hardest part is not the hardest part, but the interesting part that to me, the beauty of all this is that it allows us to create broader relationship to a community that we didn't really have access to before.
We talked about how your mask business and charity certainly grew a lot. You started, as we mentioned, as a bag company. What was the bag business like during the pandemic? People are not traveling. You mentioned that in our original podcast, the brand is designed to follow her. So what was happening? People aren't traveling anymore. So what was the bag business like, which is actually your business?
Yeah. So for one quarter, it was down.
Just one quarter?
Yeah. Surprisingly, for us, we felt so a couple of things happened, right? One thing is, so definitely for one quarter, it was pretty rough, in terms of demand. It was just, the use case is just no longer there. Nobody's going to the office, nobody's going to the gym, nobody's traveling. So that demand just kind of disappeared for one quarter. I think internally what we said was two things, right? A, we, took the opportunity to reinvest in some of our operational aspects of our business, whether it is investing in manufacturing to make sure that our factories are robust for, scaling for the future. or invest in our technology stack, which again, you will start seeing that coming live in the next few months, because it does take a little bit of time to implement some of the technology that we selected. So that's one thing we did. So we actually took that opportunity and say, yes, the revenue is down, the demand is down, but perhaps this is a good breathing room, if you may, right, to actually take a step back and reinvest in the areas that we think it's going to help us position for scaling once the pandemic will end. We were pretty certain the pandemic will end at one point, right? I mean,
plus you're getting all these customers from the masks.
We're getting customers for the mask. I think, for us, in terms of the bags, to answer your question directly, I think we purposely started to promote products that are somewhat more relevant to the pandemic. So yes, people are not going to the office, but they're still taking walks, right? For example, like hiking and walking and outdoor sport was still very much a thing, especially last summer and fall. So we had a sling bag that is, it's a very decked out. We kind of took basically north of 35 fanny packs that was on the market when we designed this and said, like, let's pick everything we love about all that. Let's pick everything that we hate about all that. Let's add our own design spin into it and then come out with, what we think the fanny pack should look like. And this thing, it's, there's a couple of sizes, but the large one has 15 pockets. It's a handbag, but it actually looks like a fanny pack, right? So, that actually did really well through the pandemic. And we continue to promote that because, folks are still using fanny packs to go to hike, go to the grocery store, because, everything needs to be hands-free now, right? People don't want to carry their totes or their backpacks. So I think there's certain products that we're starting to put forward a lot heavier than we used to because of the pandemic. So I think, yes, the use cases for a lot of travel commuter bag was definitely down, but there's certain other bags that we kind of looked into and say, can these be useful, right, during the pandemic for the lifestyle that our customers currently have? And there were certain products like the one I mentioned that did.
Well, I love how you talked about how you deck out certain products when you are designing them, whether it's the fanny pack, the baby bag. You've certainly added a line of products as well, wallets. But what is the process like when you are taking an item, the fanny pack, for example, where you get the 35 other fanny packs and then say, we are going to deck this out? That to me is just so fascinating, where you take something and you want to improve it and you're doing all this research. What are you discovering to get to that point? And how long does that process take?
Yeah, it's long and treacherous. I think that's a short
treacherous.
Answer. Well, you don't get the answers right away, right? It's not. If you look at a lot of the, let's just call them traditional brands or fast fashion retailers, you're under the gun, right? So you have X weeks or month to come out with a new product, whether you can or you cannot, you have to come out with a new product, right? For us, we have the luxury of not always work with a timeline, if you may. Look, this is a very relevant question that you ask, Kyle, because every time we sit down and design a new product or reiterate an existing product, because we do a lot of either iteration or reiteration of the existing product, we always ask, why does the world need another fanny pack, right? What does the world need another backpack? There's so much clutter in our lives and there's so much clutter out in the world. Like, why do we think this one is going to be different and unique and relevant? I think relevancy, it's a key thing we keep asking ourselves. So most of the time, I don't want to say always, but most of the time when we launch a new product, we feel that the current existing product are just not good enough. For many reasons. It could be because they're not really versatile enough, that we think that it should be more versatile, so it can be carried in multiple ways. Like our studio bag, for example, the whole genesis behind the studio bag, which is the bag that we launched the brand with, can be worn as a backpack or as a crossbody or as a satchel, right? But gives that aspect that can basically transform the bag depending if you're biking or hiking or walking or running. So that did not exist before. Maybe there are a few bags out there, but we feel that we needed to actually come out with a product that can transform depending on how she went to places, right? So I think everything starts there. Everything starts with you identify a need and you ask, is there a good solution out there? And if the answer is yes, there's a good solution out there, we move on because we don't want to add to the clutter, right? But if we feel that there's an opportunity to improve or it's just not good enough, at least from our opinion, then we take the decision to actually develop. And that process is very iterative, right? I always say that there's the kind of data-driven aspect of our design and there's the emotional aspect of design. And obviously Carmen's not here today, but Carmen is our creative director and her design is very unique. I think the way she designs is that we do take a lot of customer feedback, which is kind of the data-driven, the empirical data aspect of the design. So we take the feedback from the customers, gather data, but then there's the 50% of the things, which is kind of what I call the magic happens, right? Where Carmen, from the artistic standpoint, from a taste-making standpoint, infuses kind of her taste-making, her design inspiration, like all of the emotional things that comes with design and infuse that on top of the data, right? And I always say this, the way we like to think about our product is that, yes, we get customer feedback, but when it comes to actual form of the product, what it looks like, we hope we give you something that you don't even know that you needed. So that's kind of a little bit of the secret sauce, right? In terms of how we design is that there's the empirical aspect of it, which we spend a lot of time on and a lot of budget in terms of gathering customer feedback, but also there's that emotional kind of secret sauce that happens a little bit behind the door that kind of Carmen and her team takes together and kind of layer on top of it.
Certainly, people love the emotion behind your brand, but I'm still fascinated. There are 35 fanny packs, for example, that you talked about, or maybe you had them on a table. Why did you say we need 36? Where are you pulling that data? Where are you seeing that problem so that when people are able to connect with it? Because I think that that's certainly a key to your business because you're pulling this data out, even for the baby line. I know your baby line's getting very good reviews, but how are you identifying that problem, particularly when there is a lot of clutter out there?
Yeah. I mean, a baby bag was a very fun and interesting product to design, right? Because parents are very passionate about their baby products. And this is especially true for second-time mom and dads because they've gone through once already and they know what they loved about all the baby product they use for their first child, and they know what they hate. So what that translated to is very passionate feedback. So for that particular product, you just had to ask 3 questions and, you hear an earful, from parents as far as like, well, I don't like this bag because it's just flat out ugly. I don't like that bag because it's just heavy, or I don't like this bag because the pockets are just not right. I mean, we gather tons of empirical data from that particular design process. So that was easy to a certain extent, right? Because we already knew from all of our customers and influencers and ambassadors, what are the things we need to fix. And so what I translated to is a bag that can wear in a couple of different ways. So you can wear as a backpack. You can hide the backpack straps if you don't want to wear it as a backpack, wear it as a crossbody. It comes with latches that you can hook it to your stroller. So if you are carrying on the stroller, you can hook it up. The outside of the bag has 3 major pockets that are thermal proof. So if you are putting hot or cold products in there, that can actually keep it in their temperature for a while. The bag comes with a caddy so that if you are actually changing bags, if you may, you can simply take out the caddy in the middle and basically help you get, your bag a lot more organized. None of that existed. I mean, we did pretty extensive research on this. When we first launched the baby bag, when I looked at the baby bags in the market, none of them even came close to kind of the features that we were offering. You have bags that offered piece and components of the things I just talked about, but nothing that basically ruled them all, if you may, right? So that was, I mean, just to kind of answer your question, that was a good example of, well, clearly there's a gap in the market. Clearly there's a missing bag that can actually do all that. And by the way, keep it in a reasonable pricing, right? Because yes, we did see some bags that did maybe 80% of what we have, but cost like $400. And for a baby bag that you might only use it for perhaps a year and a half, 2 years, do you really want to spend $400? Maybe for some people, but you think twice before you spend that kind of retail cash for it, right? So I think that's the key, is to know your customers, ask them the right questions, be humble and listen. Yes, we are a design brand at the end of the day, a designer brand. So we have a very unique point of view when it comes to design aesthetic, but your customers has to be at the center of your product design process.
Why do you think other brands are not doing what you're doing with their customers?
Yeah, I think some of them are. Some of them are, and I'm not gonna claim that none of them are, or.
But the big brands are not, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
in a product cycle, which you're talking about, and have the pressure, I think, to iterate on new products or come up with ways of generating sales. But my point is that you're hitting on a niche, your customer, and you're able to become successful, whether or not it's a sling bag, baby bag, wallet, travel. So why do you think that a lot of the larger brands aren't doing this?
Yeah, I can take a stab at understanding or maybe explaining why, right? It's first of all, R&D. So, you're getting into kind of what I call R&D process, right? Of research and development of your products. I think first of all, R&D is expensive. It does take money and time to go through it. And whether you're a small brand or large brand, you have to ask the question, do you have you allocated enough R&D budget to do what you want to do? I think if you're talking to an engineering company, or a car manufacturer, or, a lot of kind of outside of fashion, the R&D budget, it's huge, right? Because that's kind of the viability of their future. But when you look at a lot of the mass brands, you'll be surprised if you take a look at some of the public ones. If you take a look at their balance sheet or their P&L, you'll be surprised to see, how much they spend on R&D. I invite you and your audience to look at it, because you'll be surprised to find what you see. So that's the first question. It's expensive, and we purposely make a decision to invest in R&D because we think that that's your moat. That's your barrier against your competition, right? In the market we're playing, it's to lead differentiating yourself through product design. Second thing is timeline. I talked about timeline before, right? We're not under the gun. If I don't feel like in 2021 or 2022 we have the right mix to launch new product, we're just not going to launch new products. We're going to reiterate existing product perhaps, but we're not going to launch for the sake of launching, for the sake of PR, or for the sake of pleasing maybe a department store, as far as like, hey, by the way, it's a new season, let me show you a new line sheet, right? Because there's more stuff coming on. So we're not under the timeline, which again, it's a privilege that not all the brands have, right? If you ask the brand, are you listening to your customer? Everybody will tell you, yes, we're listening to our customers. Nobody's going to say, no, we don't listen to our customers. We do whatever we want. But I think what you really got to ask is, what do you do with that, right? Do you actually translate it to the R&D aspect of things that we talked about? How many iterations do you go through? Because sure, you could go through kind of getting the customer feedback, but if you just go through one iteration, did you really get that right? What if you don't get it right? And when you are in an environment where you are on the gun of deliver, and there's a time clicking, you don't have the luxury of go through 9 iterations, right? It's like, I'm 60% there, let's go, launch the product. And we improve it afterwards. Back to my initial point, we want to get it right. We want to be relevant, and we want to be different and better than what's out there. So let's get it right and then get it out there. So those are some of the factors I think that goes into why I think a lot of the other brands, I would say, that potentially create something that's a bit more generic, perhaps. But overall, I think everybody is listening to their customers. Is what you do with the data and what you do with that. I think that's what differentiates you.
And what about getting more accurate data? Some customers may say, I like your bag, it's great. But then how do you pull out more data from them and say, what can I do better? But at a certain point, you're getting ways to make it better. You certainly were able to pull out feedback on other items. Let's say back to that fanny pack. How are you able to make sure that it is the product that you want to release?
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of the ambassador community that you have and the influencer community that we've built over time, right? So yes, you might get a happy customer that'll tell you, your bag is perfect, don't change a thing, I love it, I'll continue to buying it. But to your point, that data might be a little skewed because the reason that they're a customer from the start, right, is that they love the product, they bought into the product, they love it, maybe they gave a good review already, and that's why we reached out. So a lot of reasons why we reach out to existing customers asking for feedback. But your influencers and your ambassadors, especially the ambassadors that we work with, I mean, they are very passionate about the brand. To a certain extent, they feel protective of the brand, right? Because they feel that they represent the brand. We call them out as much as we can, in our social media, give them features. So they are invested, in the brand. So our well-being ties directly to theirs. So they want to see us successful, right? So even though you have products that might be quote unquote perfect in the customer's eyes, our ambassadors will call a nitpick. Now, obviously, it's the brand's position to determine what you do with that, right? I mean, you don't want to spin the wheels in the design because, perfection doesn't exist, in my opinion, when it comes to design, right? There's always the extra zipper that you can actually add or take away, or an extra button that you can change, right? So I think, ultimately, obviously, it's our creative team's decision to say what to add, what to take away, and what to tweak, what not. So there is definitely a judgment call there that we have to make, or you have to make. But I think finding a passionate group of folks, finding that group of passionate people that can give you honest feedback, I think it's very important.
You obviously couldn't predict the pandemic when that happened, and you pivoted to mass. But what do you think the future holds for Caraa, and what do you want it to hold for Caraa?
Yeah, no, it's a loaded question, but a lot, man. I think through this experience, it taught us a lot about our customers. Certainly help us to self-discover a lot more about ourselves. Our mission has not changed. If anything, we double down on a lot of things that we initially stand for. So social mission is at the center of what we do. We don't want to create a brand just to make stuff, right? We want to have a brand that stands for something. So if you look at our social channels, especially for the last 12 months, we've been a lot more vocal, with social issues, right? So when Black Lives Matter happened, we stood up and, against that social injustice. The Stop Asian Hate campaign happened, which is obviously very close to us because, both my co-founder and I were Asian Americans. We were very vocal about this, right? When Kamala Harris, our first female vice president, was elected to office, we were very vocal about that and saying that's a huge win for our country. And that kind of pissed some people off, sure. When you're standing up for a social issue, not everybody will agree to your point of view. That's what democracy is, which we love. But we just feel as a brand, we need to be more vocal. So as I think about kind of the future, that's one thing that we're not going to stop doing. We're going to continue doing our charity work. Started with Caraa Cares with the mask. We're going to be a lot more vocal in standing for injustices and social issues that we think that are important for our society. When it comes to the product and it comes to the brand, I think we are exploring expanding. Certainly, I think, we always going to be heavily focused on handbag and accessories. That's kind of our bread and butter. That's what we're specialized in. And we're not going to go away from that. I mean, we are experts in handbag and accessory. That's kind of where you come to us for. But we're exploring other categories. A lot of customers are asking us, why don't you make luggage? Why don't you make apparel? How about shoes? And, once we're 6 years in, right? So we've had, a pretty robust customer base. We've built a pretty robust customer base until now. And, when you have that kind of affinity with your customers, they want more, right? They wish they can have a one-stop shop for cool products if you are a brand that they believe in. So, man, sky's the limit. I mean, there's a lot of cool things lined up that we unfortunately can't disclose yet, but there are some. We're exploring all aspects of growth in terms of scale.
Well, we're very excited to see your growth. That is a wonderful note to end things on. How do people find out more about what Caraa is doing, Caraa Cares, and the brand?
Yep. So you can find us on carasport.com or caraa.co, carasport.com or caraa.co. And then we're very active on Instagram. I mean, that's kind of the main social channel that we're currently using to have the two-way dialogue with our customers, right? So that the handle is Caraa Sport, And we welcome all sort of messages, so whether you have a question about a product, in terms of the measurements or what it fits, what it doesn't, any questions you have, you can reach us on Instagram or send us an email directly through our website. Or whether you just want to chat and talk about new products that you think we should launch, or you want to talk about any social issues that you're seeing that we should look into. Anything and everything. Those are the couple of ways that you can interact with us, and we'd love to hear from you guys.
Arent wants to hear it all. And if you want to learn more about the New York Launch Pod, you can follow us on social media at NY Launch Pod, or visit nylaunchpod.com for transcripts of every episode, including this one. And if you're a super fan of the podcast, Arent, are you a super fan of the New York Launch Pod?
One of my top podcasts in my repertoire of podcasts I listen to.
Top podcast rated by Arent. If you're a super fan like Arent, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It is greatly appreciated and does help people discover the show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the New York Launch Pod. For more information, please visit nylaunchpod.com.